Hi everybody, today we're going to stitch out the Hoop Studio with Love projects. This is the January Hoop Studio subscription. It's available now. There'll be a link below. We're going to stitch out both the little zipper bag and the mug rug. If you hear any background noise, that's because we're having some work done on the house. I apologize. They're cutting into some concrete today and it's quite noisy. I've already prepped the materials for both projects. I've got everything here for the bag, including the little embellishments that comes with the kit. You can watch my unboxing video to see that. And then I've got everything here for the mug rug. We're going to start first with the zipper bag. This is a 5x7 project and it calls for 2 colors of thread, pink rose and white. And if you flip over to the You Are Loved mug rug, there's more thread colors here. This is also a 5x7 project. The thread colors they're giving as Glide and Hemingworth brands. I've done a thread conversion. On my thread wall, I have Floriani and Sim thread. Let me show you my threads. You'll see for the Whisper Pink and Pink Rose, I'm going to use the same color for that. They're so similar, I think it'll be easier for me to manage with one color. As I'm working through the projects, I'll call out the color name as it's given in the instructions, and then I'll hold up my color and show you. I have all my colors in my Creativity Blooms snap tray. I have a video about embroidering on the Kimberbell leather snap trays. I'll link that below for you. I'm going to be using a regular 75x11 machine embroidery needle today, and I've got my double curved applique scissors and my snips ready to go. For the With Love pouch, you do need some light mesh cutaway stabilizer. Included in your Hoop Studio files is the cutting diagram. I use this to cut and prep all of my fabrics. I will tell you that when I cut fabric for the little tiny pieces here, one's 2.5 by 2 and one is I think 2 by 2. I just cut 2.5 inch squares because I didn't want to figure out which way the little corduroy fabric lines needed to go, so I cut squares. There was plenty. For the With Love pouch, I've prepped the fabrics with a light starch of this Faultless Heavy Finish spray starch. Gave everything a good press. I did the same for the fabrics for the You Are Loved mug rug, and you'll notice here for the You Are Loved mug rug you do need some fusible backing. If you look here in step number 2, it details which pieces of fabric need the fusible backing. Make sure you've got all of that prepped. Load your light mesh cutaway in a 5x7 hoop and let's head over to the machine. I have a Baby Lock Meridian. My files are on USB. I have my instructions here on my little folding metal book stand. Again, sorry for any background noise. The first thing it tells us to do before we load our files, it says to use a ruler and water-soluble pen, measure and mark the center of the zipper on both sides of the zipper tape. I'm already sitting at my machine. I have my zipper. I'm matching up the zipper pull, the zipper stop. I've got it folded in half. I'm going to squish it like this, and I'm going to set it off to the side and leave it squished. Now that's going to leave a fold mark in the zipper. It's not going to bother me. You can go ahead and mark that with a water-soluble pen if you like. I may find I might need to mark it later, but for now, this is fine. I'm going to set it aside. Let's load our file. Let's pull up the file we need. We're starting with the With Love pouch project. I'm going to bring that up. There's only one file for that. We'll hit set and embroidery. The instructions have the thread marked with a heart, which is Pink Rose. I'm going to grab the color I'm using for Pink Rose. It's a very pale pink. I'm going to load that onto my machine. The first thing we're going to stitch out is the zipper placement line and tick mark. Once that's stitched out, it tells us to use a water-soluble pen, extend the placement line and tick mark to the top and bottom and to the left of the hoop. I have a water-soluble pen from one of the Kimberbell punch needle kits. There's also a water-soluble pen in the Clear Blue Tiles Essential set. Here's the tick mark in the middle. I'm going to extend that over. It matches up to the center line on my hoop, so it's really just a visual. And it says to extend the top and the bottom. This is probably easier to do if you're on a table. I'm just going to sort of wing it and do it right here since we're in front of the machine. We'll extend that up and then we'll go to the bottom and we want to extend this line down. It's kind of easy to do because the light mesh cutaway has a texture to it, a pattern, and you can follow the lines. So we're extended down to the bottom, over to the left, and up to the top with our water-soluble pen. I'm going to put this back on my machine. Next, we're going to stitch out the base placement line. Once your placement line has stitched out, you want to make sure to cover that completely with your project batting. It fits just inside the hoop. I'm going to go ahead and make sure I've got all my lines covered, top, bottom, both sides, add some tape, and then we're going to stitch out the tack down line. Once your tack down line has stitched, you want to go ahead and pull your hoop off the machine and trim everything outside of the tack down line. Once that's all trimmed, put it back on your machine, and then we're going to stitch out the top placement line. Next, you need to grab your top fabric. We want to make sure to cover that placement line that just stitched out. Easily going to fit. I'm going to go ahead and put a piece of tape on it just in case. Make sure I've got that fairly straight. It doesn't have to be completely straight. I'm just trying to be a little fussy about it. We'll put tape down here as well. Then we're going to stitch the top tack down line. Once that's tacked down, we're going to stitch out the quilting. You don't trim anything at this point. Same color threads on your machine, stitch out the quilting. Once the quilting is done, we stitch out the bottom trimming and placement line. We want to trim away the extra fabric here that's on the right side of the trimming and placement line. You're going to want to grab your bottom fabric. I've got this cut with what they're calling the nap going this way. If you cut it going the other way, it doesn't matter. It's still going to look great. We're going to take this and put it right sides together. We want to line this up centered along that trimming and placement line that we just stitched. Make sure you've got the right side of that fabric down. I'm going to add some tape at the top and at the bottom just in case, and then we're going to stitch out the bottom seam. I've got my tape up here and down here. We're going to stitch the bottom seam. This is still in the same color thread. Once that seam has stitched, we're going to go ahead and remove our tape and flip it open and take it to your ironing board. It does say to cover this fabric with a pressing cloth. We want to make sure we press this nice and flat before we stitch the next part. I have this pressed nice and flat. I'm still going to push it a little bit with my hand and add a piece of tape up here and make sure it's nice and flat, and add a piece of tape down here. My tape's outside the stitch line, so if the fabric is getting kind of frayed, it's not going to matter. I'm going to slide this back onto the machine and stitch the bottom tack down line. It says do not trim the fabric, just stitch out your tack down line. Once you've stitched out the bottom tack down line, we're going to stitch the lining, placement, and trimming line. We want to trim away this extra fabric on the left of that trimming line. So this little bit here, go ahead and trim that off. After we've trimmed our fabric, we have to cut a slit into the stabilizer. I'm going to take my hoop over to the table. Over at the table, we need to cut a slit in the stabilizer on the trimming line right here. I'm going to use a 28mm rotary cutter for that. Your normal rotary cutter is 45mm. You can see the difference. If you don't have a little rotary cutter, a good small pair of scissors will work. I'm going to go ahead and turn this around. I'm right-handed and I don't trust myself to cut a straight line. So I'm going to grab a ruler, line it up here right on the trimming line because it tells us to cut on the trimming line in the stabilizer. I want to start right about there. Line up my ruler, make sure it's straight. And I went slightly past the stitching line here and here. I think we're going to be slipping some fabric through, so I want to make sure I've got room for that. It tells you to place your lining fabric right side down, centered along the slit. This is a solid. I don't see a right side or a wrong side to this. I'm going to place it down, centered along the slit, just like that. Since I'm at the table and I need to pick this up and move it, I'm going to add a piece of tape here and here. I don't want that to move. Double checking, making sure that I'm along that line. That looks good. We're going to take this back over to the machine and stitch the lining seam. If you walked with your fabric, double check it, make sure you're along that seam line. Right side down if you're using something with the right side and the wrong side. Let's stitch out that seam. Once your seam has stitched out, we're going to take our hoop back over to the table. Back at the table, I've already removed my tape. You're going to want to take your lining fabric and slide it through this slit that we just made. Do this carefully, don't be in a hurry. We're still working with this on our machine, so we don't want to mess up our stabilizer or shift our project. So pull that through. I'm going to flip to the back, make sure I get this pulled through nice, neat, and clean. And then I'm going to flip it back around to the front and have a look at it. That looks nice and neat. You can see I've got the side of the fabric here kind of bunching up and pulling through because we didn't trim it, so there's a little bit extra here. I'm not worried about that. This is our lining and it's going to get caught up in whatever seam allowance we have. Once you've got that to the back, you want to pull it and make sure it's straight and make sure the entire back of your project is covered. So you can see your stitching lines here. You don't want this. See, there's a line here. You need to make sure the entire project is covered. One thing I'm noticing right away with my project, do you see the print fabric? And here's the pink lining fabric. If you look at the picture on page 27, you don't see that lining fabric. So I may not have pulled mine through enough. If I want that fabric to disappear, I actually have to pull and create a gap in my stabilizer. Now our zipper is going to go there. I've done these bags before where I've had this and this ends up showing. So I want to pull this further to the back. Here's my seam right there and kind of fold along that seam. I'm going to have to press this before I tape it. So you'll want to pull that. You're going to create a hole in your stabilizer. Do you see that? But we're putting our zipper there. So you can pull this around the back like that so you don't see the lining, and then press it, go all the way down and press it, and then I'm going to bring it back and tape it, because just pulling it and taping it doesn't quite bring it all the way through. Here it is after I pressed it, and you can see my wool pressing mat here. This is a hole in the stabilizer. Don't worry, we're going to put a zipper there. But now I don't see any of the lining. I'm going to flip it back over to the back side and reattach my tape. I've got the tape on. I don't see the lining fabric. Let's go back over to the machine. Next, we're going to stitch out the pouch trimming line. We're going to take our hoop off the machine, grab your zipper, and we're going to head back over to the table. Got our zipper. Now I didn't mark mine just has fold marks. We're going to be placing it right side up, and I can still see the fold marks, so I'm good with that. We're going to align the center of the zipper with the extended tick mark on the stabilizer and align the bottom edge of the teeth with the edge of the fabric right here. The zipper pull will be facing you. I'm standing over here, so the zipper pull is down. Here's the center where I folded it. Here's the extended mark, and you're essentially putting the actual zipper over this hole that we made. So you'll be able to feel the edge of the fabric right here, and when you set your zipper down, it bumps. You'll be able to feel that. It's not difficult to get it in the right place. Make sure the zipper stop is at the top of your hoop, extending beyond this stitch line, and the zipper pull is at the bottom of the hoop outside of the stitch area. It tells us to tape this in place, and then we're going to stitch the tack down. Let me tape this. Double check. Zipper right side up. Zipper pull facing you. Zipper stop at the top. Tape. I'm going to tape that. Now I'm going to double check and make sure that I can feel that bumping against the fabric all the way to the top. Tape down. And then I'm going to go all the way to the bottom. You can just slightly slide it over and you'll feel it hit that fabric line. Press that down really good, and then you're going to grab another piece and we're going to tape this side and press that down. It's going to tape right to your hoop. And this is the Kimberbell paper tape. It will come off. It's not going to leave a yucky sticky residue or anything on my hoop. It'll be fine. That looks good. We're going to head back over to the machine. I'm back at the machine. I slid my tape over a little bit because I can see where this is going to stitch. It's going to tack down our zipper, and I don't want to have to pick out the tape. Once you have everything set, your zipper's taped in place, we're going to stitch the zipper tack down. Once the tack down is stitched, go ahead and get the hoop off your machine. We're going back over to the table again. We're going to remove it from the hoop and remove the tape. Since I have tape that's actually taped to my hoop, I'm going to pick off all the tape that I can get to first, and then I'm going to get this out of the hoop. Once you've got this out of the hoop, we want to trim the excess stabilizer and the fabric close to the stitch line, but do not trim the zipper. You definitely don't want to trim the zipper, because if you trim the zipper right now, you're going to cut off your zipper pull. Trim close to this line here. Here's what that part looks like trimmed. We're going to go ahead and set this aside. You want to load some stabilizer in your 5x7 hoop. I have two 5x7 hoops, that's why this one looks different. We're going to head back over to the machine and stitch out the next part of this project. Back at the machine, we're on part 2, stitching the pouch back. It tells you in step 1 to stitch the back. Repeat the instructions in part 1, directions step 2 to 27. Let's go to step 2. Step 2 starts us back at the beginning. We've loaded our hoop. Our file is already loaded on our machine. Mine finished the stitch out and it went back to the beginning, so it's ready to go. We're going to stitch out the tick marks and then do the extension lines like we did last time. Once you have that stitched and you've drawn your little marks, we're going to stitch our base placement line, cover that with our batting, tack down the batting, and trim, just like before. Once your batting is trimmed, you want to stitch out the top placement line. Once that placement line has stitched out, we're going to do the same thing we did before. Cover it with the top fabric, right side up, add a piece of tape. We'll stitch the tack down, and then we'll stitch the quilting, and then we'll stitch the bottom trimming placement line. I'll run all of that together because we just did that for the other side of the bag. Once you've stitched out those steps, trim off this extra fabric. Just like before, we've got our bottom fabric right side down, centered along that stitch line. I've added my tape. We're going to stitch the seam, then we're going to flip it, take it to our ironing board, cover it with your pressing cloth, give it a good press, and then come back and stitch the tack down line. Next, we're stitching the lining, trimming, and placement line. You want to cut off the extra fabric, and then you're going to cut that slit like we did last time. Grab your lining fabric and place it wrong side down and bring it back to the machine. I'm going to go ahead and do all of that off camera because we just did that. I trimmed my fabric, cut the slit. I've got my lining fabric set. I've got it taped. I'm going to stitch out the lining seam. Once you stitch that seam, we're going to do the same thing we did last time. Take off the tape, flip the fabric, tuck it in through the seam, and iron it so the lining doesn't show. Then we'll flip it to the back. You tape it down just like before, and then we'll come back and we'll stitch out the pouch trimming line. After that, what we do is going to change. I've got my slit cut, my backing fabric flipped through, pressed, everything is taped. We're ready to stitch out the pouch trimming line. Now that is step 27. That's the last step we're going to repeat. After we do this, we're going to move on to something different. Once that pouch trimming line has stitched out, we're going to take this over to our table. Do not take this out of the hoop. We've got our back of the pouch in the hoop, our front of the pouch right here. I need to know where the center of my zipper is. Since I didn't mark it, I'm going to fold this in half. And I'm going to finger press this again, and I can see it's right at the center of this little flower. You want to take the front. I'm going to use this to help line it up. So centering it there. You can also look at the stitch lines. You've got the stitch line here and here and here and here. It's kind of easy to center because if you've marked your zipper wrong and you're like this, you know that that's not right just by looking at it. It's almost easier to line up those stitch lines. Get some tape ready. This time the zipper pull is up top. Same thing, you can slide this over and feel it bump. And I'm going to line up my stitch lines rather than worry about where the center of my zipper is. Make sure that that's nice and straight. This is nice and straight. Grab my tape. I'm going to start my tape here, just like last time. Kind of press that over, making sure that it's bumping against the fabric. Pushing my tape down as I go. We'll just work our way down the zipper. You can also pick it up and look. And I think I'm going to need one more little tiny piece of tape there at the bottom. Got that tape. I'm actually going to flip it to the back and have a look. We should be able to see the back side of our zipper right there. See the zipper? If you can't see your zipper, then you've got it sort of shifted incorrectly. Stitch lines match up here, stitch lines match up here. My zipper is taped. Zipper pull is at the top. We're going to go back to the machine and stitch that zipper tack down line on this side of the bag. I've got everything taped in place. We're going to stitch that zipper tack down. I think I had my zipper a little bit close over this time. I almost sewed over the zipper. Make sure you're keeping an eye on your machine. Again, sorry for any noise out there. I think they're throwing concrete or bricks or something into a wheelbarrow. We're going to take this over to our table. We're going to do the same thing we did last time. We want to go ahead and get rid of the tape, get it out of our hoop. We're going to trim away any excess stabilizer, but we're not going to trim our zipper. So the next thing it tells us to do is to lay the pouch flat, right side up. Zipper pull is on your left. Cover it with a pressing cloth and press it well. Once you've got this pressed, it tells you not to trim your zipper, but to go around and trim exactly on the trimming lines. Right now, we trimmed next to the trimming lines, which has helped keep everything together. But as we assemble the bag, we're going to be moving the lining around, so we need to go back and trim on the lines here, but don't trim your zipper. I feel like I can use a rotary cutter for this part here and this part here, but just like before when I was trimming next to the stitch line, I'm going to have to use scissors for here and here. It's going to be difficult to do that with a rotary cutter and a ruler. So however you think is going to be best. I've got fuzz everywhere again. I guess I'll wait until the very end to lint roll this. You want to lay it flat, right side up, open the zipper to the center mark, so middle of your bag. You want to do that because we don't want to accidentally cut off the zipper pull, and we're going to be sewing it together and needing to flip it. You could probably even pull it a little further over. Just make sure that it's not over here or over here past the stitch line. You need an opening. We're going to be using the ribbon. You need to cut the ribbon. If you watched my notebook cover and pen pal, I forgot to cut the elastic and it was too big. On page 2 of your instructions, it tells you to cut the scalloped ribbon 1 3/4 inches. We're going to take our ribbon, fold it in half, and it tells us on the open side of the zipper, so this side right here, to align the raw edges of the ribbon with the edge of the zipper pouch 1 inch below the zipper teeth. So just kind of eyeball it. That's about 1 inch. I'm good with eyeballing it. We're going to pin it, but you want to pin it through the front layer only. We don't want to pin it through this lining layer. We're going to be moving that lining. So we've got that right there. I grabbed a pin. I grabbed a bent pin. That's fine. The raw edges line up with the raw edge of the bag, like that. We're going to pin that. And then make sure you haven't pinned it to your lining. I'm grabbing some clips for the next part. We need to align the quilted sides, like that, and then the lining sides. You have your lining, and the quilted side, and the quilted side. I am going to take a minute to clean away the fuzz because I don't want anything to get caught between here and the lining and then to show through. So take a minute and get rid of that. You want to line everything up and either clip it or pin it into place. As you're going around, pay attention to this part right here where your fabrics change. Make sure they're lined up and then pin or clip that. I'm going to need to double check the other side. I wasn't paying attention. I'm going to add a clip right there. Make sure that's held into place. That way, when we sew our bag together, the sides are going to match. Yeah, I didn't do a very good job over here because I wasn't paying attention. Line those up. That's better. We'll put a clip over here, and then I'll put a clip on the other side as well to hold that in place. A pin might be better for this, but I've got the clips in front of me. Just like that, I'm going to continue going around. Now we're going to check on our zipper. You've got your lining and your quilted side. You want to make sure that everything lines up. So we've got the zipper part, the zipper teeth here facing the lining, the zipper teeth facing the lining. Make sure that that's nice and lined up. I'm going to clip it, you can pin it. I just don't feel like sticking myself with pins today. We're going to look on this side and do the same thing. See how the zipper part is up toward the lining, the scallop is pointing down, the zipper part is up toward the lining, and the scallop is pointing down. We're making sure that everything is lying in the same direction, that we don't have like half the zipper like this and half like that. Make sure everything matches up. We can go ahead and add a clip or a pin. We're going to sew over it, so I'm going to be moving that anyway, but at least I have it in the right direction. We're getting ready to sew. If you look at number 7 on page 7, we've got the quilted part here and the lining here. It tells us to leave a 3-inch opening down here. We're going to be flipping that. So what I'm going to do is actually go grab a couple of pins. I'm going to pin that. That will just be my visual reminder that I don't want to sew between the pins. I'm actually going to leave myself a little bit more than 3 inches. I usually have a hard time turning things right side out, so I want to leave a little bit extra. Let's see what that is. Let's grab a ruler. I left myself 4 inches. That's fine. We're not sewing the corners. We're going to be doing what's called boxing your corners. So don't stitch these yet. Slow down your machine when you're going over the zipper. Just be careful, you don't want to break a needle. It does tell us to backstitch at the beginning and end of each edge. So if you're sewing along this line here, you'd start here, go forward and back, sew all the way down, go forward and back. That's what they mean by back stitching. I'll go ahead and do my stitching and bring this back and show you. I have everything stitched. Once you've got everything stitched all the way around, it tells us we can trim the excess zipper ends 1/4 inch from the seam line. I've got a ruler here with a 1/4 inch mark. I'll go ahead and line it up. It should be the outside of the fabric. Yep, 1/4 inch away. I have one rotary cutter that I use for sticky things and zippers and things like that. And we'll cut the other side. Next we're going to stitch the boxed corners. If you've never done that before, it can be a little bit tricky. We're going to open the corner. It's a little bit of a tight area. What you're trying to do is match up your seams. It tells you to nest the seams. If you can do that, that's great. It's kind of hard. There's not a lot of room here to work with. And this fabric, the red, is really fuzzy. Do the best you can. Try and match them up like that, and then you'll take it to your sewing machine. You can clip it, you can pin it. It wants to curve, but you want to pull it as straight as you can. Try and make this straight. Sew with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and I would go back and forth across it twice. You can fold one seam one direction, one seam the other. That's what they mean by nesting the seams. If you've never boxed corners, maybe start with the lining first. Probably easier. You can pull the lining apart. Yeah, it's much easier over here. Line everything up, get it nice and straight, and stitch with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So if it's your first time doing box corners, do the 2 lining corners first, and then do the 2 corners that have the, slippery stabilizer and fuzzy corduroy that's shedding everywhere. Just give yourself time. I've boxed all my corners, and I'm going to be completely honest with you. These are absolutely 100% the worst boxed corners I've ever stitched in my entire life. They're crooked. I didn't do a very good job. I'm not sure what my problem is today, but let's just go with it anyway. We're going to turn it right side out through the opening. I'm going to check and make sure. Looks good though, doesn't it? That looks good. The lining ones are better than the other side. And let's make sure that it's all stitched together and I don't have any holes. That looks okay. We're going to turn it right side out through this opening in the lining. Go ahead and flip it. It says to carefully poke the seams with a blunt tip to square. Before I go poking anything, I need to make sure that everything is completely sewn over. I need to check the boxed corners on the other part of my bag. I couldn't get them straight for anything. So I stitched them on a curve. Let's have a look. Hey, it looks okay. All right, as long as it looks good, right? Now I stitched with a light color thread. You can see my thread. If you've got a darker color thread, when you go to box these corners, that's probably going to be helpful. I'm going to go ahead and turn it the rest of the way out. Now it looks like this. Get the fuzz again. We need to close up the hole in our lining. It says to hand sew it closed. I don't hand sew things closed. It just doesn't happen. I'm going to pull it, take it to my machine, fold in the raw edges, and just put a top stitch over it. It's the inside of the bag. I'm not worried about it looking perfect. I've got my hole stitched closed. I have a beige thread on my machine. If you want to make this look better, if you've got a pink thread, it'll definitely look better. I think I've got fuzz permanently stuck in the seam. I'll try to get that out with some tweezers. Got fuzz. Go ahead and lint roll it, and then we're going to push this inside the bag. My tweezers have gone on vacation. I can't find them, so the fuzz stays. We're going to push that in and try to line up the lining with the bag. Now, I'll tell you right now, my lining does not perfectly line up with my bag, and that's because I had a lot of difficulty, with my corner. Do you see that? Oh, bummer. And now I've already sealed my lining. Do you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go get my glue gun. I have this little Sure Bonder Cool Shot glue gun. It is a hot glue gun. It just doesn't get flaming hot. It's good for materials like this, things like lace felt paper. I'm just going to put a little glue in here and push it together to help keep that seam in place and to help keep the fabric from fraying. Luckily, this isn't a gift for anybody. You know, mistakes happen. If I really want to fix it, it honestly wouldn't be that hard. All I would need to do is just seam rip the little part that I just stitched to close the lining, flip it back out, redo my corner, flip it back, and close the lining again. But since I'm kind of on a deadline and I want to go ahead and finish this, I'm just going to put a little glue in the corner. There we go. Doesn't look the best, but we'll go with it. Let's continue flipping. And one thing you can do too with glue, like hot glue, see how you can see the glue there? You can clean it up sort of by reheating it and then sitting here and removing some of the glue. It's the bottom anyway. Nobody's going to see it. You want to make sure to flip that out. That's where your zipper is. You might have to get a corner poking tool. I've got one over here. I've got a clover point turner. I'm going to go ahead and pull the zipper a little bit and see if I can't get that flipped out a little bit better. If you marked your bag with the water-soluble marker, you want to go ahead and dissolve that. I didn't do that. I'm going to grab the little ring with beads. This came in the kit. If you hold it like this with the bow over here, turn this down like that, it's going to loosen. There you go. Put that through the little loop right there, and then we'll tighten it back up. It's just decorative, just for fun. And you'll know it's tight when you can't turn it anymore. Here's my finished bag, faults and all. You can zip it closed, zip open. I wouldn't hold this. Like if you're giving it to somebody, this isn't really to hold on to while you pull the zipper open. This is just decoration. You can leave off the little ribbon if you don't like that. If you want, you could put a ribbon on either end and then attach a little strap. It could be a little handbag for a little girl. Nice lining, one nice boxed corner, one with some glue on it, but that's okay. It looks really good. Very cute. Next, we're going to work on our mug rug. We're going to start on the You Are Loved mug rug. This is also a 5x7 hoop project. I've got my stabilizer loaded in my hoop. Step 2 on page 11 shows you which fabrics need fusible. Step 1 has us folding the fabrics for the backing. I'm going to do that when we get to the step where we add the backing. I have a tendency to fold them the wrong way and then having to iron them twice. So we'll do that later. Let's head over to the machine. Let's bring up our file for our mug rug. It's just one file. Go ahead and hit set and embroidery. We're ready to go. We're starting with the pink rose. It's the same color we've been using, so it's still on my machine. We're going to start by stitching out the batting placement line. We'll place our batting, we'll tack it down, and then we'll trim. We did that with the other project. I'll go ahead and run those steps together. Once your batting is tacked down and trimmed, we're going to stitch the mug rug template. That's all stitched out. This is section 1. This is section 2. We've got our piece 1 fabric. We want to place that right side up, covering section 1. And I'm looking at the picture. It looks like I did cut this, quote, correctly. The stripes are going this way, but honestly, if you cut it with the stripes going this way, it's going to look fine. Don't worry about it. I'm going to lay that down, make sure we completely cover section 1. I'm going to go ahead and add a piece of tape just in case, and then we're going to stitch out the trimming and placement line. You want to trim away the fabric right here at the top on this side of the trimming and placement line. Once you have that trimmed, grab your piece 2 fabric. This is a rectangle, so there's a shorter edge and a longer edge. We want to place it right side down, the longer edge centered along the placement line. Like that. I'm going to add a piece of tape, and then we're going to stitch the seam. I'm going to remove my tape, and then I want to flip it and press it. I'm going to take this over to my ironing board and give it a nice press. This is nice and pressed. I've removed my tape. We're going to stitch the piecing tack down line. It's going to stitch a rectangle around the whole thing and then stitch out the quilting detail. I'll go ahead and run both of those steps together. Make sure if you have any tape on here that you take it off before you do the quilting. Otherwise you have to pick the tape out from the quilting, and that's no fun. I just had a thread break. There is something about some of these projects today. When it's going to make the turn, my thread keeps breaking. It's happened almost every time. It happened on the bag project, and now it's happening on the mug rug. So if that happens, just, take a minute, rethread. My machine is not at full speed. I'll go ahead and rethread and back it up a few steps and restart. The quilting is all stitched out. We're going to switch to whatever color you are using for mint green. We're going to stitch out leaves and stems fill. Switch to Whisper Pink. I'm using the same color for Whisper Pink and Pink Rose. We're going to stitch out the wrap placement line. That's hard to see. You want to grab your wrap fabric. We want to make sure we cover that placement line. I'm going to have to take an extra minute here, probably get this over at my table because the lighting here is not sufficient. And then you'll tape it and we'll stitch the tack down. I've got my fabric placed and taped. I tried to get it so the flowers are going to show on the wrap. We'll see how I do. It is really difficult to see that placement line. Let's see how I did with my fabric placement. Wow, that's almost perfectly centered. I did good. So I've got a nice flower bunch there and one right here and a little bit at the bottom because it ends right there. You want to go ahead and trim everything that's outside the tack down line. I've got that trimmed. That looks really nice. Once you've got it trimmed, go ahead and put it back on your machine, and we're going to stitch out the wrap satin outline. Switch your thread to Rosy Blush and stitch out the wrap detail. Switch to Light Burgundy. We're going to stitch out the placement line for the bow. We want to grab our fabric for our bow and cover the bow placement line. It looks like it has the nap running this way, so the lines will be up and down on your bow. If you're sitting at your machine, this is a little tilted. That was one of our birds. So it's not completely straight. So when you're laying it down like that, it actually needs to turn just a little bit. I'm going to set this on my table and make sure I have it lined up correctly. That looks pretty good. I taped it in place. I'm going to stitch the tack down and then trim. Once that's trimmed, you're going to stitch out the bow decorative outline and center fill. Switch your thread to the color Chianti, and we're going to stitch out the Heart 2 placement line. Grab your Heart 2 fabric, and we've got the lines running this direction. We want to cover that and tape it and stitch the tack down. Next we need to trim the fabric outside the tack down line, and then we'll stitch out the satin outline. Switch to Pink Rose, and we're going to stitch the Heart 2 detail. Next we're going to use Rosy Blush. We're going to stitch out the placement lines for Heart 1 and 3. Grab your fabric for hearts 1 and 3. Make sure to cover the placement lines. I'm going to go ahead and tape that in place. Stitch the tack down, trim it, and then stitch the satin outlines. We're going to switch to pink rose and stitch out the hearts 1 and 3 detail. The next part is stitching out the You Are Love. In the instructions, it has that being stitched out in the light burgundy. This is the color I have picked for light burgundy. Then I have this darker thread, the color I picked for Chianti. I'm going to stitch it out in the darker thread. This really closely matches this fuzzy corduroy fabric. I think it's going to tie it in together. It's going to stand out a little bit more. I'm going to stitch out the words with my color for Chianti. Let's see how this stitched out. I did not change my bobbin thread. There should have been something that popped up on the screen beforehand. I'll type a note to remind everybody. I don't change my bobbin thread to match because my bobbin thread is a 90 weight thread and the embroidery thread is 40 weight. You can get a different kind of bobbin case to accommodate the different weight of thread. This looks great. I don't see any of my bobbin thread poking through, and we're going to be putting a back on this, so you're not going to see the back side. Up to you if you want to match your bobbin thread. Going to need our backing pieces. They fold this way on the long side. So if you've got it cut like that, fold it and press it. I did that while the words were stitching out. Switch to your white thread and then we'll place and tape our backing pieces. Also switch out your bobbin if you changed it to the red color to match. I have my 2 back pieces folded and pressed. Make sure to check them for that red fuzz. There's fuzz everywhere. Make sure there's no fuzz on the inside, because if you have fuzz in here and then you fold it and press it, you're never going to get it out once you tack this down. It'll be stuck forever and you'll be staring at that piece of fuzz thinking, why didn't I lint roll that? Okay, these are ready. We're going to place both of these on the back. Let's start with this piece. I have the open edge facing toward me. The fold is here facing toward the center. We're going to be overlapping our folds in the center by about 1 inch. An easy way to do that is to look at your hoop. You've got your center marks here on your hoop. Give yourself about 1 inch. And another easy way, you've got the stitch lines. Make sure you cover your stitch line. So don't put it like that because we need to cover that stitch line. If you line that up just like that, that looks good. I'm going to slide it over a little bit, center it, and then we're going to take our other piece, make sure the open end is toward the top this time. You can line it up over that stitch line, and you can see I've got about 1 inch from that mark on my hoop, and I've got about 1 inch there. So it's an easy double check. You can check those stitch lines and the marks on your hoop. We want to grab some tape. We're going to tape it right there across the top. A piece across the middle that's going to hold that fold down to make sure our presser foot doesn't get caught, and a piece along the bottom. Then we're going to head back over to our machine and stitch out the final outline. We're ready to stitch out the final outline. Even though everything is taped, I like to keep an eye on my machine. It's a real quick step. No need to get up and walk away. Let's stitch our outline. We're all done at the machine. Let's take this over to the table. We want to remove the tape. We're going to get the project out of our hoop, and then we're going to trim all the layers of fabric and stabilizer 1/4 inch away from the final outline. I'm going to line up the 1/4 inch along that stitching line, and then I'm going to cut. You can also eyeball it, just don't cut on your stitches. Trim all the way around. Next, you want to grab a pair of scissors and clip the corners. That's going to help reduce some of the bulk. So when we flip this right side out, the corners will turn a little bit easier. We're going to flip this right side out. I have my little clover point turner here to help me get the corners. And after you have it flipped right side out, you can give it a press on your iron. If you're going to press the front, make sure to be careful of that corduroy material. Maybe cover it with a pressing cloth. And it looks like I need to cut some jump threads as well. Everything's turned right side out. I gave it a good press over at the ironing board. Let's have a look. It looks great. No need for a glue gun with this one. I think I might have a thread I need to trim, but other than that, everything is done. What a pretty little mug rug. This is perfect for Valentine's Day. Both of these together make a really fun gift. You can look at the size of this. That's a small little bag. If you're giving this to somebody who's a tea drinker, you could fill this with tea, or you could fill it with candies. You could even put gift cards in it if somebody likes to drink coffee and go to coffee places. Came out really nice. I hope you've enjoyed making the Hoop Studio with Love projects with me. I'll link some playlists in the description box below. I have lots of Hoop Studio projects, perfectly pieced projects, including a new fun project for this year with the digital version. We're stitching out a perfectly pieced mystery quilt. I just started with the applique of the month club. I have a full-length tutorial for that. And coming up next, we're going to work on the designs from the Well Wishes design collection. These are shown on the new Cinch Sack blanks, and I've got some of those to share. So we'll get a look at all these designs and the new blanks. Make sure you like, subscribe, and share so you don't miss a thing, and I will see you next time.